Hi, welcome to the class today, Make Time for Herbs in Your Garden. My name is Robin Pollack, and I hope you'll enjoy the class today. I have been a master gardener for 17 years, and I've been an art teacher for 35. As an artist, I like to focus on color, texture, and space, and design my garden to function well and to look good at the same time. I was inspired when I was a little girl and we lived in England, and I used to follow the gardener around and look at the beautiful English gardens. So when I came back to the States, I just went ahead and jumped right in. What are we going to talk about today? Well, first we're going to talk about what are herbs, then maybe a little bit of the herbal history and the growth requirements. Do we want to propagate? How are we going to do it? And then we're going to list some common annuals and perennial herbs. Of course, there are some pests and diseases that we're going to have to discuss, but I think that you'll find that herbs are pretty disease and pest resistant. Do you want to plant indoors? Do you want to put a container on your patio or plant in the ground? You've grown these wonderful herbs, and now we want to harvest them, and we also want to preserve them. And of course, we want to know all the special uses that we can use herbs for. So what are herbs? Well, herbs have been used for centuries, since prehistoric time, for food and medicine. But today, they're probably known for their contribution to good living, to season the foods, provide nice fragrances, or even to add interest to the garden and beautify the landscape. They generally are defined as non-tropical plants, soft stems whose leaves and flowers are grown primarily for culinary, medicinal, or aromatic uses. Herbs can be both perennials, biennials, or annuals. Perennial means they are seasonal and they go back down to the ground and come back the next season. So they go dormant in the winter. Biennials take 18 to 24 months to complete their life cycle. And annuals, as you know, are seasonal. They plant them, they grow, and then they die. Some herbs are cool season herbs, and others thrive in warm weather. The herbs are distinguished from their spices because spices are usually the product of the roots, seeds, bark, or fruit, whereas herbs are used for their stems and flowers. So how far back do herbs go? Well, we have some early information during the Chinese period, and that was 2700 BC. And of course, we've heard of herbs being used through the Egyptians, but the Greek influenced the use of herbs after the 1st century through the Middle Ages. After that point, monks became the custodian of herbs and their secrets. In England in 1597, John Herbal wrote an encyclopedia of herbs that grouped the plants according to their use. And 100 years later, or 75, by 1652, Culpeper wrote The English Physician, which the settlers brought to North America and used for plant IDs and for medicine. Also, herbs have been used for centuries in literature. Hamlet talked about the sweet rosemary, and Shakespeare used herbs often in his plays. Also, Milton used herbs, fennel, in his writings and in a lot of literature. What do we need to grow herbs? Well, herbs, like vegetables, need a minimum of 6 hours of sunlight a day. They also like well-drained soil. Herbs do not like to sit in water. And to avoid root rot, we want to make sure our soil is healthy. Loamy to sandy soil is fine, but as in Georgia, we have heavy red clay, it's important to add some grit and some organic matter. Herbs like a soil pH of about 6 to 7.5. Rosemary and lavender like a little more alkaline soil at the top end of 7.5. Now, southern soils may require additional dolomitic lime. How do we know if we need fertilizer or lime? I recommend getting a soil test. You may not need any fertilizer after your initial planting, and herbs don't require a lot of fertilizer, but some annuals do. Heavily harvested herbs such as basil, chives, and parsley require more fertilization. And of course, mulching is a must in the Deep South. There are many things you can use as mulch. You could use shredded bark, you could use wood chips or pine straw. And we use this to discourage the weeds and to give an even supply of moisture to the soil. So we would like to plant our herbs. How do we grow them? Different herbs require different needs. A simple way to propagate is by planting seeds. A number of herbs, particularly annuals, can be grown for seeds. You can either direct seed in the spring, or if you want to grow them in your indoors, begin in late winter. Certain herbs only can be grown by seedlings, and so it's important to know either use seeds or transplants, which you buy from any nursery or garden center. Another way you can propagate is by taking cuttings. Certain plants, such as lavender and rosemary and tarragon and lemon balm, only propagate by cuttings. In doing so, you want to cut 3 to 5 inches of new growth of your plant, make sure it has 2 or more nodes, and remove all the lower leaves. You want to dip the cut end in rooting hormone and insert them into a potting medium. Another technique for propagating is plant division or layering. Some herbs form clumps and they're thick with roots. They can be divided. You can either take a shovel, cut down into the root and take a portion out, or you could dig up the entire plant, cut it into pieces, and replant it rather quickly. They benefit herbs that clump from dividing at least every 2 to 3 years. And of course, it gives you more plants. Another method similar to dividing is plant layering. It is where you bend a portion of the stem to contact the soil, taking the leaves off, and the roots will grow from the different nodes that are in the soil. So what are some annual and biennial herbs and some perennial herbs? Well, you see that there are many warm weather herbs as well as cool weather. Basil is a warm weather annual. Cilantro is a cool weather. You wouldn't think so coming from Mexico, but it is a cool weather vegetable and cannot tolerate our humid, hot summers. Cilantro also goes to seed, and some of the seeds are harvested of herbs such as dill or cilantro for coriander. Parsley is a winter herb, dill a summer, but these are either annuals or biennial herbs on this list. The perennial herbs are on the right-hand side. And of course, they're the ones that come back year after year after year. So I try and put quite a few perennial herbs in with my annuals. But of course, with any planting, there are going to be pests and there are going to be diseases. but you will see caterpillars on your herbs. Please identify them before you want to try and eradicate them. For example, black swallowtail butterflies and monarch caterpillars are found on dill, fennel, parsley, and related plants. Some people plant these simply to attract the butterflies, and you will enjoy the reaping of that when they start fluttering around at the end of the season. You can also have leaf hoppers, and they literally hop from plant to plant. Often they can just use a water hose and a spray to get them off. If it doesn't, I cut away parts of the plant that they are on, but usually they can be controlled by water. Leaf miners, on the other hand, burrow into the leaves and leave little white trails on things like parsley. And again, I cut away those parts that are damaged. Now, aphids and whiteflies occur summer, winter, it doesn't matter, but it is helped by good air circulation. So if they're very matted, your herbs, you may want to go in and clear them out so that they have better air circulation. Rust, another one that's a fungal disease, sometimes on mint and lemon balm. And again, opening them up, giving better airflow will help eliminate the different diseases. Which brings us to mildew. It may be found on basil and lemon balm, but again, thin it out. And of course, with our summers that are so humid and hot, and then they become so dry, you might get some root rot. And of course, it's due to overwatering. More herbs are killed with kindness of overwatering than any other thing that would affect them. So unless you can put your finger in the soil at least an inch deep and it is dry, don't water. Remember, a lot of these herbs come from the Mediterranean, and it's hot and dry and harsh conditions. Again, using a simple spray of water, or if that doesn't do the trick, I use organics, only organics in an herb garden or a vegetable garden, because you use in herbs the leaves, and you would not want to ingest the chemicals that you are going to spray on the herbs. But organic matter such as BT, which is Bacillus thuringiensis, insecticidal soaps, or even just Dawn in a bucket of water will usually take care of most of the pests and diseases on herbs. Again, remember I said generally herbs are pest and disease free, but these are things you want to look out for. Also, consider adding beneficial insects such as ladybugs to your garden to make it even healthier. So now we're ready to plant. And as I said before, it needs at least 4 to 6 hours of sunlight a day. Now, don't just assume that you have it because there's light coming in, but a south-facing window usually takes care of it and gives you adequate light. Whether you're doing indoor planting, outdoor planting, in the ground, or in a planter, raised bed, containers should have drainage holes. You don't want them to sit in water. Be sure you can empty the excess water in the saucers too, because we just talked about root rot and we want to avoid it. But don't use planting soil when you're using a container. Use a good lightweight artificial soil mix, oftentimes with extra nutrients and added benefits. Water regularly, but do not overwater, and water the herbs only when they're dry. Now, herbs in a pot require more water. It may need it every day because it can't draw water from the surrounding soil. So to keep it evenly watered and not too dry and not too wet, is the key. Also, if you are growing them indoors, don't forget to rotate the plants so that they get even light, and things like basil and other herbs, you want to pinch them back so that it can encourage bushiness. Use fertilizer monthly, but sparingly. And remember, certain herbs that you harvest regularly will require more fertilizer than the others. The instructions are on the plant tags that come from the different nurseries. And now we've grown them, they look fantastic, and now we want to harvest them. How do we do it? Well, herbs that are grown for their foliage can be harvested at any time. Herbs grown for their seeds, such as fennel and dill, can be collected soon after the plant has reached maturity. I like to collect my herbs in the late morning, rinse them quickly, and air dry them. Drying and freezing will definitely preserve them. When you dry them, I take a group, I tie them up, and I want to hang them in a warm, dry, dark, well-ventilated space, and they cannot touch each other, or it will be harder for them to dry around. Now, that is one method. You can also dry herbs in a microwave for 1 minute, laid out on a baking pan, not touching each other. What I like to do is take my herbs, take the stem, stem them, and all I have on my tray are the leaves. I need to make sure they have lots of room to move around so that they will dry evenly. You could even put them in an oven at around the lowest temperature of 100 degrees or so. I like to keep the oven door open a little bit, and every 30 minutes, I like to mix them. They should be dry in about 3 to 5 hours. Now, if you dry them in a microwave, you want to be sure that you don't over dry them. Herbs in a microwave should come out green, not brown, or you overcook them. Another way you can preserve your herbs is by freezing them. Rinse them really well, take them off the stem, and pat the leaves dry. Put them in labeled freezer bags, because when herbs are dry, they mostly all look the same. Also, a thing I like to do is place the leaves in ice trays, put them in water, and fill them with water and freeze them. As you know, basil is wonderful for making pesto. When I make pesto before the summer season is over, I'll also take an ice tray, fill my pesto in each of the little ice cube holder places, and then in the winter months, if I want pesto sauce, all I have to do is pop out 1 or 2 cubes, and it will reconstitute in moments. Frozen herbs are generally good for about 3 to 6 months, but dried herbs can last a year if they're stored properly. So, what are some other uses of herbs? Well, there are artistic, culinary, and medicinal uses. As far as the artistic uses, we love them for scents, for incense, and for perfumes, and all kinds of scented fragrances. We also can use them decoratively. Again, you can dry them in bundles. Remember, we tied them off, and you can use them in flower arrangements or swags or wreaths. I like to make a simple potpourri and keep it in the different rooms for a wonderful scent. Now, of course, herbs have been used in culinary world for centuries, dried or fresh. Well, dried herbs are used all during the cooking process, and fresh herbs are more commonly used at the very end or as a garnish. As a rule, each tablespoon of fresh herbs that is called for in a recipe can be swapped with 1 teaspoon of dried herbs and vice versa. Also, they can be used for butters and sauces, flavoring breads and cakes, cookies and cocktails, infusing oils and vinegars. And we mentioned pesto. I'd like to, if I'm making a vinegar, use 1 part herb to 4 parts vinegar. Let them steep about 3 to 6 weeks. Pour off the vinegar into a clean container so that I can get the herb out. And then I usually add a sprig of fresh herb into my vinegar bottle. The same with oils. You need to infuse the oil with the herb. You need to heat the oil, pour it in, let it set 6 weeks or so, and then take it out. Take out the herb, and if you want to add a sprig for decorative purposes, it would be a great idea. We also use them for all kinds of medicinal things too. Now, some of the most commonly used herbs are basil, thyme, sage, rosemary, mint, dill, cilantro, oregano, tarragon, lavender, chives, and parsley. You will find many, many uses once you start preserving and harvesting and putting them up. Also, we talked a little bit about medicinal uses. Well, of course, we all know herbal teas, but they're herbal ointments and tinctures. For example, rosemary was used and is still being used as a hair rinse or mosquito deterrent. Lemon balm will perk you up in tea. Marjoram has lots of vitamin K and it helps encourage strong bone growth. Oregano can drain your sinuses and is great if you have arthritis or inflammation. And of course, we all love peppermint tea and peppermint for headaches and things like that. And basil has an antibacterial component and is used throughout other countries. And thyme, of course, can be a household cleaner. I also like to use herbs in the landscape. Many, many herbs are attractive in perennial borders or among your foundation plantings. They can be great as edging plant, and in my path of stone, I use thyme between all of the stones. It's both fragrant and attractive, and when you walk on the path, you step on the thyme and you get a wonderful scent as a bonus. In the next video, I want to show you how I plant a container herb garden. I hope you'll enjoy the video, and at the end of the video, we will answer questions. Please be sure and put your questions in the Q&A window. Thank you and enjoy the video. Hi, welcome to my herb garden. As you know, we talked about the herbs, and I wanted you to see my garden at the end of the summer. We talked about different methods of planting herbs, and you, of course, can use the ground, but I like to plant in containers, mainly because my herbs get out of control. This rosemary was a 4-inch pot in June. So you want to be sure and plant for mature plant height. We're going to plant this container today, and you see I've already put a rosemary in the middle. Now, what are other cool season herbs? Well, parsley is a huge cool season herb and will last almost into the spring and summer. So I know that this is going to get, as I said, the tag tells all. It needs 6 hours of sun. It needs to be container deep planting, and if you were doing it in a garden, about 2 feet apart. But I know that rosemary grows in about 1 square foot of dirt, soil, so I'm going to put it in the center. This will give us a nice effect of a tall thriller, a medium filler, and a spiller. But I'm an art teacher as well as a gardener, and everything has to be done so that it looks good as well as it works good. The old adage, form follows function, is how I garden. So I'm going to take another parsley and put it on the other side so I can begin to balance. Similarly with sage, I have a tricolor mixed sage, which will be much shorter, that I'm going to put in the front, and I have a garden green sage that I'm going to put in the back. Now, this pot is meant to be seen all around. It's just that I'm standing in the back. We also want some spillers, and for my spiller, I use thyme and oregano. And I will put them in knowing that they are going to grow down in that direction. Now, what else do I have? I have some cilantro. Most people think cilantro is a warm season plant, but it is not. It grows well in cool weather. So I'm going to add it between my oregano and my sage. And finally, there is another variety, flat leaf parsley, which people like and has a little different flavor than the curly leaf. And I'm going to put it on the other side. So now we're getting ready to plant. Now, on the other hand, I have a few warm season herbs. I have a Thai basil and a sweet basil. These are best in the spring through the end of the summer. However, you can bring them inside and have them on the windowsill and have your summer herbs during the winter. So, let's see how are we going to do this. Well, we're going to take our plants away now that you know where they're going to go. And I've already prepared my soil. I used a good potting mix, added a little bit of fertilizer to it, and I know that this is good soil that will allow the herbs to thrive. So, I'm going to take the first herb, and the soil's nice and soft, and this is called a tricolor sage. So I'm going to simply turn the pot over. Now you see there are lots of roots on the bottom. So I'm going to have to carefully bring it out. You notice that the roots are wrapped around. I want to give them more room to grow, so I'm kind of wiggling the roots to give them some breathing room. And then I've already fertilized, but if you didn't fertilize your potting soil, you will want to add a little granular fertilizer. Then I simply stick the sage in the dirt, add a little bit more potting mix up to the edge of the root ball and press it down. Well, that was easy. Let's try it again. Now I'm going to do my 4 corners. Again, I like symmetry in some things, and especially in the heights. So I know that the parsley is going to get tall also, not as tall as the rosemary. And look, these have nice white roots, and they're wrapped around, but you really want to see a healthy root, and I even have new growth. So I said I was going to put it here. Again, if you didn't fertilize, you want to add fertilizer. Wiggle the roots, lay it in, tap it down, and add soil. Again, we're going to put this on the other side. Same thing. Oh, I see a worm in here. That must be a good sign. And again, wiggle it out. Wiggle the roots. Boy, these are some healthy plants. And parsley is so great all season long. Okay. And again, add some soil and tap it in. Starting to look like a planter now. Well, we definitely need something in the spilling category. And of course, I have thyme. Now, I use thyme all over my garden as stone fillers. And when you step on the path, you get this very fresh aroma of thyme. So it's not just for pots, but you could use it as edging or in between your stones on a path. So, again, the same process. Now, one thing I want you to think about is you want to group herbs that have the same soil condition and moisture condition. Many herbs like to be very dry, and you're not going to water them unless you stick your finger in and it is dry 1 inch down. Otherwise, if you think about it, many of these herbs, such as rosemary, grow in the Mediterranean, hard, dry, rocky climate. So we're trying to duplicate that here. Now we'll add the flat leaf parsley. And so just simply add to it as you need. Now, what herbs should I plant? I get asked all the time. And my answer is whatever you like to use. Because although they have a beautiful flower, some of them, and they smell good, we want to be able to use them in our food. So we're about finished now, and we're going to add some oregano. And I think that we're filling this guy way up, so we're about done. I forgot to add the other sage to the other side, and thank goodness there's room for it. And again, look at your pot. Where are the holes? Does it need a little tender loving care? Here is the flat leaf parsley. Okay, well, I think that this pot, let me add a little dirt all around now to bring the level up. And you see that this pot will produce a beautiful array of herbs. So you need to water it thoroughly, making sure the water comes out of the bottom, and then let it be. And I hope you have many, many happy days of using your herbs. Thank you. So I hope you learned something in our little presentation, and I wanted to make sure you understood some of the references. When I look for books on and information on herbs, I try and find books that are in my zone or in my area. We are 7B or 8A in Atlanta, depending on whether you live north or south. So an Atlanta herb sampler will tell us really some great herbs to use for the Atlanta area and southern gardens. Also, there are encyclopedias of herbs and their uses. And of course, I love the books on southern herb growing. So please do some research and see if you can find references and books that meet your needs. We're going to go to the question and answer period today. So I hope you've entered them in the window. And Dana, are you there? And do we have any questions?
Yes, hi. Thank you very much. We have several questions, Robin. The first is, where can I get my soil tested?
That's a great question, and thank you for asking that. Soil tests are available through the North Fulton Master Gardener Annex. There is one at the North Fulton Annex building, and or you can write or call the University of Georgia County Extension Program, and they will send you a soil sample bag. You collect samples of your soil from 6 or 7 locations, mix it together, let it dry, and put it in the bag. I believe that the soil sample test is around $12 or $13. And within a week or so, the University of Georgia will send you back your soil with what their needs are. Does it need lime because we're in red clay soil, or does it need other fertilizers? So please do get your soil tested because you don't want to add fertilizer or lime unnecessarily. Dana?
Thank you. Do you recommend pine bark over pine straw? Is one preferred?
I think that as long as you're covering the ground, you're cutting down on weeds by having a covering, and you're ensuring that there's an even moisture. Some people like pine bark better because it stays and you only have to apply it once a season. But others would rather use pine straw for a more natural look. And many people have it in their yard, so they simply break their pine trees and use that. It's also a little bit cheaper, but it's really a personal preference.
What types of artificial potting mixes would you recommend for indoor herb pots?
Well, you want to find a indoor planted potting mix. And often they have nutrients and they have added compost, and there are many. There's one called Brown Cow that has extra organics in it. There are many in the garden centers, and as long as you have a tried and true, many of them have extra nutrients so they will grow larger. So I don't want to give you a specific one, but I want you to read the bag and see if it meets your needs.
And why shouldn't we use potting soil? I've always used that for indoor plants.
Well, potting soil is what you do want to use. You don't want to use garden planting soil, which is what you would put in the ground or a raised bed. But potting soil is very appropriate.
Do you suggest using self-watering bulbs with herbs, and how would you insert them?
Well, self-watering bulbs are great if you're going out of town, and you simply fill the bulb with water, turn it over, and it will slowly drip out. But I don't like to use it all the time, except maybe as a plant indicator, because remember, you're only getting a small area for the water to come out. I prefer to water my plant thoroughly until I see the water running out of the bottom, and then leave it alone, because herbs like to dry out in between so that they don't get root rot.
Is lamb's ear a perennial, cold weather, or warm?
Lamb's ear can go either way. If you plant it in the summer, it will get nice and bushy. By the winter, it's gotten a more of a woodsy, hard stem. So it will winter over, but it is at its peak in the summer.
What is dolomitic lime, and where can I purchase it?
Dolomitic lime is a natural lime. And I, as an art teacher and a potter, which I taught pottery on the wheel, use dolomitic lime in all of my glaze recipes. So it's not only used in the garden, but on pottery, which is made out of clay. It's available at any garden center or, of course, online.
What about using wheat straw as a mulch for a vegetable or herb garden?
Well, wheat straw is pretty good as a cover crop. And if you're amending your soil, letting it rest maybe you don't want to plant in the winter, but you want to have a fabulous garden in the spring. So I like to amend the soil, and wheat straw is a very good cover. You could either plant clover or cover it with a straw to get the nutrients to break down and to support good soil growth.
How long can you store herb butter in the freezer? Thinking specifically about basil butter.
Well, again, if you'll remember that I said you don't want to store frozen herbs for more than 3 to 6 months. They lose potency. So I would rather do smaller batches and more often. And remember, when you put something in the freezer, it's really important to label it, but not just what it is, but when you froze it, when you grew it, and that way I have a running history. If it's already gone bad, I will know anything I planted 8 months ago didn't make it. But the more information you can put on your bags, the better.
What is meant by pinching back basil?
Okay, so basil gets very bushy. And if you go into the plant regularly and pinch off what you're going to use, it still may not be enough for the fast growing basil. So I like to go in and shape it and pinch it back. And what that means is you go into the leaf to the stem, and I like to go where there are at least 3 leaf swirls and pinch back. Or if you see any growth between the stems, like suckers, those are great to pinch back, and they will contribute to a fuller, bushier, more healthy plant.
I've noticed some of my herbs taste bad depending on when I pick them. Is there an optimal time to pick herbs to eat, specifically cilantro and basil?
Yes, I like to pick in the late morning after the dew has dried. And then I like to wash them quickly. Then I lay them out to dry, or I'll pat them dry, depending on if I'm going to use them that day or if I'm going to freeze them or dry them.
Could you please repeat what size pot you used when you planted it so beautifully in the video?
Oh, thank you. I used as large a pot as I can have. There is a book called The Square Foot Gardening, and it talks about how much space each plant needs. It's written by a guy named Mel Bartholomew out of Connecticut. And of course, we're in the South. But the concept is that every plant needs a certain amount of space. So as I said in the video, rosemary grows in 1 square foot. So if I'm going to put a rosemary in a pot, it has to be at least 12 inches diameter. And then if I'm going to add other herbs, I want it as large as I possibly can. Herbs like to grow rampant, so the more the merrier. But remember, you don't want it to outgrow the pot. If it does, overwinter, divide, and have it ready to go for the spring season.
What are the best soil conditions for growing dill outdoors? I know it's an annual. Could it be grown successfully indoors as well?
It can be grown indoors because today with grow lights and potting soil and all kinds of chemistry techniques, we are able to bring it in, put a grow light on it, or put it in a sunny window and watch it every day. Plus, it's beautiful and adds a whole nother element to your indoor growing. As far as outdoors, remember, all herbs need 6 to 8 hours. Some of them can get away with 4, but 6 hours of sun a day. They need to be planted in well-amended soil. Now, because it's an annual, it doesn't have to be tilled in the soil as deeply because it's only going to have 1 season. But if it were a perennial, you would want to make sure that your soil is thoroughly tilled so that it is as healthy, and adding compost and other organics will make sure you have the healthiest soil you can, well drained and irrigated and watered.
When infusing herbs in oil, how hot do you get the oil? And did you say let them infuse for 2 to 3 weeks?
Yes. What you want to do is you want to add warm, not hot, because that will burn it, but warm because then the herbs break down more quickly. Cool it down, and I put it 4 to 6 weeks in the pantry, and it seems to do great. I take it out, I strain the herbs out of it, put it back in a jar. I might add a decorative herb to the jar, and it's great. You can give it as holiday presents. You can use it for quite a long time.
My purple basil has not done as well as my green. What am I doing wrong?
Well, every basil has its own set of situation. The green sweet basil will grow anywhere, anytime. The purple basil, which is used a lot in Thai cooking, is a little more finicky, but it lasts a little longer. So there are many, many different kinds of basil, and you need to find the one that works for you. I like a little of each because it's decorative. It's a tiny, tiny leaf. The purple basil's a bigger leaf, but the purple opal. And then, of course, you have the green. So already you have green and red, and it's a beautiful combination.
Are there any herbs that do not like mushroom compost?
Mushroom compost is a compost, and all plants need healthy soil. So whatever you do to get that soil pH between 6 and 7.5 after you found the results of your soil test is helpful.
Should we put mulch in our herbs that we have in a pot or above an above ground planter?
I'd like to. It does retain the moisture. And as I said earlier, because it's in a pot, it tends to dry out more quickly, especially if it's in a clay pot, because remember, clay absorbs moisture. If it's in a plastic pot, not as quickly does it lose water. But sometimes with herbs, especially in the summer, I have to water my containers every single day.
I had a brown gold looking bugs attack a plant I thought was a milkweed. Is neem oil good to eradicate them?
Neem oil is great for everything. It's basically an insecticidal soap, and it's all organic. But you don't have to spend lots of money on a horticultural neem oil, where you can simply take some Dawn, put it in a bucket of water, and it really is the same ingredients and does the same thing. The problem with organics, such as neem oil and Bacillus thuringiensis, is you have to reapply every time it rains because they're not as strong as chemicals. They don't get into the leaves like chemicals. So it's a little more labor intensive, but whenever I put something in my mouth, I want it to be all organic.
Which herbs do well from seed, and which do you recommend buying as seedlings instead?
Well, many of the annuals do very well by seeding. You can either seed them in the ground, and usually if you'll read the package, it'll tell you how deep to plant them, but usually it's twice the diameter of the seed itself. So you want to either plant them at that depth and put soil over it in the early spring after your last frost has passed, or if you want to grow them in little pots in the greenhouse or in a sunny window, I like to put a growing medium in it, put my seeds in each little pot. I start about 6 weeks before I want to plant them. And when they get 2 to 3 leaves on them, I then transplant them into a 4-inch pot and let them grow. And after the last freeze, I put them outside in a shady place to harden them off, which means acclimate them for the spring weather. And then within a few days, I will simply transplant them into the garden.
Do you have problems with fungus gnats in your indoor herb pots? And if so, what do you do about it?
Well, oftentimes gnats and things like that come from poorly ventilated herbs. So if you notice them starting to congregate, then let's find out why. Is your soil too wet? Oftentimes they're attracted to moisture. But no, I would make sure that you have adequate sun, adequate moisture, but not too much. And I think you will be fine with the gnats and so forth.
What is lemon balm good for?
Spreading like crazy. It is a very invasive plant, but it's also a beautiful plant. We use it in teas, lemon balm, in tinctures and ointments, and it's a very versatile plant. It also, as I said, likes to spread. And again, many of these herbs do, which is why I like to plant them in containers. It can only go so far.
I purchased 4 varieties of lavender seeds, found a video where you wet a paper towel in a plastic bag and store in the fridge for a month, then put in a sunny spot to sprout. Do you know this method?
Well, that's simply seeding, and it's very similar to the technique we talked about of the layering. You want to layering and the propagating technique of some of the other techniques, but I only have mild luck with it that way. I would rather have them where I see them every day. I can keep them humid and moist. I usually put my herbs in the tray in a big baggie, so it creates its own little hothouse. And I wait until I see the germination. And when I finally see germinating in my grow trays, I take the plastic off and allow them to grow in their little trays before I put them into a pot.
Can you use a dehydrator on herbs?
I do. It's great. And you'd want to, again, take the stems off, take the leaves off the stem, lay them spread out. Often dehydrators have a couple of different levels. And so I like to do a different herb or the same herb on maybe 3 or 4 levels of my dehydrator. And then I can do a lot of a batch at one time. So yes, dehydrators are great to use for drying herbs.
How can I propagate thyme to use as a ground cover?
Well, thyme is very rampant, and we don't have a lot of problems with propagating it. You can either divide it or take cuttings. And if you take one plant, divide it in half, I can use maybe 6 in a 6-foot stretch of a path, because I'll take a big one and divide it in half, and then I'll have more.
How much or what is the ratio of dawn to water in your?
You know, I would say a couple of big spoonfuls in a gallon of water. Remember, all you're looking for is that soapy scum. In other words, when you spray neem oil or you spray the soapy water oil, you're coating the leaves so that the insects aren't able to penetrate it. And that is also why you have to reapply if you have an infestation of a certain disease or pest every time it rains. And
Okay.
Georgia's really, really hard in the summer, because remember, you have hot, humid summers, fluctuating temperatures in the winter, and herbs have to be able to handle all of this in the southern garden.
That's it for the herb related questions. We have a couple of more that are not necessarily herb questions, but for an out of control garden areas overtaken by weeds, is there a North Fulton contact for bringing goats in to clear the area?
I've seen those goats and they're really great. But, you know, we don't have it in the North Fulton Master Gardener program that I'm aware of. I will find out, though, and I pass by where the goats live every day on the way to Peachtree down Wyuka. They live at the corner of Wyuka near Peachtree Road. So we can investigate and let you know.
Okay, let's see. And that is it, Robin. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. Turn it back to you, Robin.
Thank you. Well, I wanted to let you know that there are all kinds of links that you can find us. And so I hope you will look at us on different programs. I want to thank our partners who have helped us get the word out. And I hope you have enjoyed that presentation today. We also want to thank our other partners who advertise for us. And if you want to support the North Fulton Master Gardeners, there's a website below where you can purchase beautiful plants for your garden. I hope that you will join us next time, Saturday, October 1st. We have fabulous fall fairy gardens. On the left, you'll see the YouTube channel where you can view previous classes that we've taught. And on the right, you will see a registration link for the future classes. I hope that you enjoyed the class today. Please don't forget to fill out the survey. Tell us what you liked about it, what you didn't like, and what you would like to see our subjects in the future. Thank you so much for coming today, and I hope you enjoyed it.